So from my late teens to my mid-20s, very few thinkers have had as much of an impact on my inner life as Alain de Botton, who is a philosopher, writer, and the creator and founder of the School of Life. Here are 5 lessons from his work that really helped me grow and I believe can do the same for you. Number 1, you're actually quite annoying to deal with. We have all at one point or another thought to ourselves that someone was very annoying. And I'm sure if you think of the people closest to you, I guarantee 80 to 90% of them have at least one thing that annoys you, whether that's a quirk or a behavior. As much as it's easy for us to identify the things in others that can be annoying, Alan points out that we sometimes don't really think about the ways in which we can be annoying to others. We seem to judge people harshly for their shortcomings, and sometimes in an unforgivable way, probably because we think to ourselves, we couldn't possibly be like that. Alan's work points out that if you can be introspective enough to recognize our own shortcomings or the ways in which we are annoying, or at least even acknowledge without certainty that there are probably things about us that will drive other people mad. If we can acknowledge this, then maybe we can be a bit less judgmental and a bit kinder to other people. If we can be kind to ourselves for our shortcomings, if we expect other people to be kind to us and forgiving, then it's only right that we extend that same courtesy to other people. Number 2, love isn't enough. Alan argues that romanticism has ruined our idea and approach to love in relationships. And I completely agree with him, which is why I made this video about 4 years ago, definitely inspired by his work on how Hollywood ruins love. We think that love can get us through anything, but the truth is love in a relationship without communication, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, forgiveness, and intentionality is only going to lead to resentment. Alan talks about how romantic movies and books don't really show the parts of relationships that make up most of it, the boring parts, doing the dishes, figuring out who's going to cook dinner, talking about finances and how they're going to be managed. These things that understanding can only be reached from having conversations, mind-numbing conversations. But considering that these are the aspects of relationships that can lead to conflict and sometimes breakups and divorces, we probably should be paying more attention to them as opposed to the romantic gestures that we see in the movies of flowers and chocolates. Not saying those aren't important, but they seem to be the only thing that gets highlighted and seems to be glamorized on social media. Number 3, your childhood plays a bigger role than you think. One of Alain de Botton's most profound contribution to the conversation around human behaviors is just how much our childhood plays a role in our emotional lives. Alan argues that many of our adult behaviors, our anxieties, our patterns of conflicts in relationships, the way we handle criticism, the way we handle praise, and these things are rooted not in reason, conscious decisions, but in early emotional experiences that we internalized before we could even name them. For example, a child who only received praise and love whenever they accomplished something would eventually grow up to be an adult who equates self-worth with productivity and they end up feeling guilty whenever they rest or have some downtime. But he doesn't pathologize this, he normalizes it. We all have some kind of emotional baggage because everyone has experienced some kind of misattunement in early childhood, whether that's through over-involvement, whether that's through absence, inconsistency, or even well-meaning perfectionist parenting. We often end up recreating the emotional dynamics that we experience in childhood, not because they're healthy, but because that's what's familiar to us. Alan emphasizes this concept of repetition compulsion, which is the tendency for us to repeat emotional patterns that we experienced or expressed in our youth, in our adult relationships, often hoping for a different outcome. For example, someone who was raised by a cold or critical parent may end up seeking out an emotionally unavailable partner, hoping to heal the wound through this new relationship by trying to fix it. But Alain is also deeply hopeful. By reflecting on and understanding these early influences, we can gain agency. Emotional maturity, in his view, is not really about being unbreakable. It's about recognizing and identifying this child within us, caring for it, and learning to act with awareness rather than being controlled by some invisible script from our past. He encourages us to look at some of these behaviors or patterns that we recognize as problematic now and just reflect on and acknowledge how these behaviors may have helped us to survive in the environment that we found ourselves in as children. And we can thank our childhood selves for coming up with these behaviors or strategies to help us survive in the environment that we found ourselves in. But at the same time, gently and firmly say goodbye to those behaviors as they no longer serve us in our adult life. The fourth one, you'll marry the wrong person. Alain's essay, Why You Will Marry the Wrong Person, went viral, ironically because that's what people needed to hear. I think this is one of his most controversial but liberating ideas. The reason you're going to marry the wrong person is not because you're careless or you're just doomed to fail, but because whoever it is that you pick to marry is in some way the wrong person. We are all, to an extent, fundamentally mismatched. And here's why. When we choose our partners, or whoever it is that we're going to get married to, we choose them with the emotional logic of our childhood rather than with the rational logic of our adulthood, at least most of the time. And we don't necessarily pick the person who is guaranteed to make us happy. We pick the person who is more familiar to us. And that familiarity can either be comforting or it can be slightly painful, especially if our earliest models of love was with volatility, conditional affection, or just coldness. And the problem is we don't marry someone who is completely finished. We marry them mid-draft, and so are we. But the romantic ideal says that if you're with the right person, then everything is going to be effortless. But this isn't reality. Love isn't a seamless compatibility. It's a skill. It's an active process of negotiating, learning, apologizing, and growing. Not just once, but over decades. And Alain reminds us that if you think you've made a mistake because you are running into problems, then you probably haven't. You've just experienced the reality of what relationships eventually experience. The goal isn't to find someone perfect, but it's to find someone whose wrongness you're able to deal with. No one is perfect. No relationship is permanently fulfilling. Stop looking for someone to complete you. Work on yourself and work on becoming an amazing partner. And then the last one, number 5, school didn't teach you the important things in life. So most of us learned all the stages of mitosis and how to calculate algebra and advanced calculus before we left high school, but we never learned how to apologize or how to love wisely or how to spot a manipulator. The curriculum we really needed was one with emotional literacy, psychological insight, how to navigate the ambiguity of adult life, how to communicate effectively with others. Alain calls this the tragedy of modern education. We're taught everything except how to live. But here's the hopeful part. What school didn't teach us, we can still learn, but you need to be curious. Traditional school and traditional educational system kills curiosity. It essentially just trains you to follow instructions, but you can start rewiring yourself and training yourself to be curious, to ask questions, to learn about different things, travel the world, see different cultures, learn about history, economics, taxes, learn communication skills, negotiation skills, relationship skills. These are things that are all freely and readily available online and anywhere for you to learn. And it's just unfortunate that we didn't have this while we were growing up and you didn't have it as a child. But now as an adult, you have the freedom and the opportunity to seek out this knowledge and be a student of the school of life. Now we can read philosophy not as an abstract concept, but as a guidance. We can study psychology not to pass a test or an exam, but to understand ourselves better. We can reflect on art and relationships, not as a means of entertainment, but as a way for our own emotional education. The responsibility is now on us. If we want to live wisely, then we need to become students of life, intentionally, wisely, maybe even with our own created syllabus. If school didn't teach you, then go teach yourself. Read books, read about philosophy, read about psychology, watch online lectures about whatever topic it is that you're trying to get more proficient at. Go to therapy, talk to your friends about something real. You don't need a degree in emotional intelligence, you just need to care enough to learn. These are the 5 lessons that have stuck out to me from Alain de Botton's work over a decade. There's a lot more, but I just chose these 5 to talk about today. His work is really interesting. It doesn't necessarily give you all the answers, but it definitely gives you questions that makes you think and sometimes feel a bit existential, which is part of what this channel is all about. So thanks for watching. If any of them resonated with you, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll love to speak to you soon. See you in the next video.